Hello, friends, and welcome to the Epic Human Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Blair, and thanks for listening today. Today's episode features Patrick Sagisi, venture capital investor with DBL Partners, a San Francisco-based venture firm focused on delivering double bottom-line returns, both in terms of financial and societal benefits. His firm has backed incredible companies such as Tesla, SolarCity, SpaceX, Farmers Business Network, Pandora, among others. In this episode, Patrick tells us about growing up on the far-off island of Guam, competing as a swimmer in 3 consecutive Olympics, attending both Berkeley and Stanford, earning degrees in both engineering and business, navigating his career as an operator in the world of tech, and eventually becoming a prominent Bay Area venture capitalist. Anyone who meets Patrick instantly knows he's a great guy. But as a result of this conversation, I gained a new respect for Patrick's mindset, particularly around his sense of discipline. Competing in athletics at the elite level helped him gain an incredible self-discipline at an early age, which has served him throughout his career and his personal life. So without further delay, please give it up for an epic human, Patrick Sagisi. And we are live with Patrick Sagisi here at DBL Partners. Welcome to the podcast, Patrick.
Hey, Joe. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, happy to have you, and thanks for hosting me at your office. So Patrick is a venture capital investor with DBL Partners. That stands for Double Bottom Line. And we're going to talk all about it and what that means. But first, we're going to start just the way we start most podcasts, which is the origin story of the guest. And so I would love for you to tell me about your background, where you were born, where you grew up, and what you were like as a kid.
So I was born in New York, and in high school I got bitten by a radioactive spider. Nope, sorry, wrong one. No. But actually, it's funny you asked that, Joe, because it's one of the questions I love to ask the entrepreneurs that we meet, is the superhero origin story and figure out how and why they got where they are, because everyone's path into venture capital is different, but it's always interesting to see. So I'm originally from the island of Guam. Actually, more people know about it today because it's a big U.S. military base out in the Western Pacific. I was born there, spent most of my early childhood there, pretty idyllic setting. It's kind of like growing up in Hawaii, which is great. The downside is it's kind of like growing up in any tropical paradise. You could either, when you grow up, you can work for the government, you can work for the military, you can work for the tourism industry. And none of those was particularly appealing to me. But I did spend a lot of time in the water. I got to be a pretty decent swimmer, competed in the Pan Pacific Swimming Championships, South Pacific Games, and World Champs and other events. And that led me to end up going to school for high school in Jacksonville, Florida, on the east coast of the U.S. And I'd always had my whole life this sort of dual focus, so sports and school. Ended up getting into UC Berkeley, where I studied engineering. So I did a double major, and it sounds like a triple, but it's just a double. Electrical engineering, computer science, and material science engineering. And I was also a member of the Calman swim team. Go Bears! So during that time, it was a lot. It was about 40 hours of something a week training, but I managed to compete at a national level. I also got to go to the Olympics 3 times for Guam. Seoul 88 games, Barcelona 1992 games, and after college, Atlanta into the 1996 Summer Olympics, where I was also the flag bearer for Guam in the opening ceremonies.
Wow. Hold on one sec. So you...
In fact, yeah.
So you were in college,
yeah,
and at Berkeley,
yeah,
and then how does the timing of you in college line up with your first Olympics?
I went to my first Olympics as a senior in high school.
Oh, okay. So this is when you were living in Florida?
Yeah, when I was living in Florida. 92 in Barcelona was my 3rd or 4th year at Cal. And then I continued training after for another year or two after I graduated, because I wanted to make another run for it. And I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to do that, be both an elite athlete and a student. And I think, it takes a lot of work. You're definitely putting in the 10,000 hours to get good at something, and but it also taught me a lot of discipline and just being able to get stuff done without a lot of time available.
And are there particular events you specialized in?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I was a sprinter. I swam in the 50 freestyle, the 100 freestyle, and the 100-meter butterfly.
Awesome.
So short events.
And does educate me here? Does Guam have its own team, or is it part of the U.S. team?
It does. So the International Olympic Committee recognizes Olympic countries. Guam and all the U.S. territories are separate members, as is something like Hong Kong, which is now part of China but competes under its own flag. Taiwan competes under the city of Chinese Taipei. And
like the Bahamas?
Right. They're a separate country as well.
Yeah.
But basically, so I have one citizenship. I'm a U.S. citizen. Guam's part of the USA, but they have their own separate Olympic team. And growing up, I had competed for them a lot in the Pacific, different regional competitions in Japan and the Pacific. And frankly, I made the cuts for U.S. Olympic trials, but in '96 I would have been like in the second final or later, so I wouldn't have made the team. But I still, in addition to that, there's also minimum qualifying standards that FINA, the International Swimming Federation, puts, which is basically like top 50 in the world to qualify to go.
Wow.
So our island has a very strict no tourist policy, unlike some other places. So if they're going to send you, you're going to have to be able to compete.
Wow, that's incredible.
But
and just, I mean, for the average person, like they have no idea what competing in the Olympics would have been like. We see it on TV, but like, is there any way you can encapsulate like what it felt like to be there?
Yeah, I'll give you two things. So one is opening ceremonies, right? Everybody sees this giant spectacle on screen on the TV, and it's hours long, and they put you in a little holding facility, which is usually a stadium next to the stadium, for about 3.5 hours while they go through all the big shows and stuff before the parade of athletes. And it's boring. I mean, it's nice. You can meet with a lot of your friends, but there's sort of a lot of electricity in the air.
Sure.
But it really becomes real once you start walking through this long, dark tunnel into the main stadium. And it's always a long, dark tunnel for some reason. You're walking through, and I'm feeling this right now. Like the nerve endings on all of your skin just start building up and getting electrified and on fire and on fire and on fire. And all of a sudden you burst out into the light, and there's 100-something thousand people there. They're screaming. It's the Olympics.
Whoa.
And every nerve ending in your body is on fire for the next 24 hours. And the hard part is not being up and energized. It's actually calming down and finding your center so that you can actually focus on doing your race. And then when it does come time to get on the blocks and on the race, it's the Olympics, but it's also still a swim meet. The pool is 50 meters long. Your lane is 9 feet wide.
Right.
You have your event. I know how many strokes it takes me in butterfly to get down and back for each length of the pool. I know what I'm trying to do. And you just have to find a center and focus amid the chaos and give it your best go. And, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. One of the great things sports teaches you is that you're going to get knocked down a lot. You're going to lose a lot more races than you win. You just try to make the ones that you win count for a lot. And that's actually a lot like what we do as investors, too, because if you look at the way our venture portfolios are done, we'll invest in 23 to 25 companies in a fund. Half of those are probably going to fail or return very little capital. There's a few that'll be profitable or do okay. But those 1 or 2 home runs, like the Tesla, for DBL, Tesla, Solar City, Pandora Media. We have some other companies coming up soon, like the Real Farmers Business Network, SpaceX, Planet Labs, Mapbox. If you can find a few huge wins, they can really make a difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just one last question on the Olympics is those nerves and the way you perform and the way you prepare and the way you execute. Did that change for you personally throughout the 3? Like, did you notice differences between the 3 for you personally?
I think my first time there at the games, I was 17.
Yeah.
I had my 21st birthday at my second one and my 25th birthday at the third one. There is this sense of becoming like a veteran and knowing how things are going to go. At the same time, every city and every games has its own unique, different character. A lot of it's shaped by the country you're in. A lot of it's shaped by where you are in your career. I started out as a backstroker, but I had to morph and evolve through college to a butterflyer and a freestyler. And my body, with all that training was getting better all the time too. I had the good fortune before the Atlanta Games to get a training scholarship to Australia's National Olympic Training Center, the Australian Institute of Sport, and just live there for a year. So it wasn't like going to school and training 45 hours a week. Actually, the NCAA says you can only do 20, so officially 20 hours a week, and the rest was gym and stuff was quote optional.
Yeah, for fun.
To improve that you did on your own.
Right.
They couldn't mandate it, but if you wanted to do well, you had to put in the time.
Got it.
And then after college for a year and a half, like being a working 40, 50 hours a week and training another 40 hours a week. Time management skills come into play really well here. So I had a year where I was just an athlete. I got a great offer and went to train at with the Australian Institute of Sport. They're a lot of members of the Australian national team, and basically like being at the US Olympic Training Center for a year. And just having the luxury of being able to focus everything on the goal of getting ready for Atlanta was really, it's a lucky time for me. And I got to the next level, really.
And were there any, just because I'm interested in exercise and like health and whatnot, was there any tricks or tips that you picked up, whether from a diet perspective or kind of a perspective of not getting injured? Were there any tricks you used?
Warm-ups and stretching, and it was funny because in high school I had a coach who was all about cranking out the mileage. As a sprinter, you're doing 50, 60, 70,000 yards a week. Distance people do like 80 to 100, and it comes in cycles. In college, it was a lot more about technique. In Australia, it was really about technique. It was funny, I did less yardage, but tougher work. We did a lot of, I had a Russian coach who had been the former coach of the Russian national team. So we did a lot of, the takeaway here is you don't need all the fancy training gear and machines to get well and do. I mean, if you remember, is it Rocky IV where he goes to Siberia and he's just working out with like stuff, or all the Rocky movies, right?
Yeah.
You don't need all the fancy gym gear. It helps to have that, but we did all kinds of crazy gymnastics and stretch and core
Did you go
exercises, running on the beach. We were doing rope climbs. We were playing basketball, doing all kinds of cross training and fitness training. But so that all around fitness combined with really working on specific techniques for your sport, the right pitch angle for your arms, the right timing for breathing and doing things, especially in butterfly, helps a lot. But in terms of like general fitness, running is the fastest way to burn off weight. Unfortunately, you just got to put in the miles there. And then I would say that really focusing on your technique will keep you from getting injured in whatever you're doing.
Gotcha.
When you're training that much, I mean, if you're swimming 10, 12, 15,000 meters a day, you can pretty much eat whenever you want. You don't have to worry about it. Your caloric burn is high. And
do you still swim, or?
I do.
Or what do you do for exercise generally?
I chase my 6-year-old around.
Yeah.
No, we're fortunate. We live up in the East Bay Hills. We're next to Redwood Regional Park, and so we go for a lot of hikes and all. If I'm lucky, I can sneak into the pool a couple times a week. I still like to touch the water. It's as natural to me as walking.
That's awesome. All right. Well, so let's take it back to you graduated college. You're working. You do well. I guess let's get to when you graduated college. Like work-wise, what did you?
Work-wise, I went to work for a company called Dallas Semiconductor. They've been bought up by Maxim now, but basically I was an engineer in a wafer fab, developing new chips, and that was my first taste of. I was lucky. So very often when you join a big corporation, you'll get stuck on, let's crank out the next iteration of something that's been around for a while. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have been in groups and big companies that are like, let's create the version 1.0 of something that we've not done before. And bringing a new technology-enabled product or service to market. In semiconductors and consumer, later on at places like Adobe Systems or helping spin out a company from Xerox PARC, consumer and enterprise software, hardware, and then moving on, even medical devices. I spent some time at a company called Ventana Medical Systems before they got bought by Roche, and even with Samsung. And I think the path for me was always about learning to do the algorithm really well. Of like, we have an amazing idea, we have an interesting technology, let's find a really good market need and create a product or service around that. Lead that team through the design and development cycle, get it to market, ship it, launch it, and grow early revenues. And I worked with some really amazing people throughout the years who taught me how to do that. And for me, that's been a sort of invaluable tool as on the other side of the table as an investor, because as a former product manager working in manufacturing ops and sales and marketing, I did my own sort of rotational leadership development program. But it's easier to go from, in sports terms, I've gone from being the athlete to being sort of like a coach in some ways, and trying to help the entrepreneurs that we work with through the difficulties that they come across and the road bumps and the speed bumps that they hit as they're trying to build their own companies and bring products to market and launch them out into the field and get them growing and get traction. So
yeah,
it's been invaluable. There are many ways into VC, but like I come from the I would say it was like the operations branch.
So I guess how did you make that transition, and how did you, like, what was your first exposure to venture capital?
I came back, and so for graduate school after the '96 games, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to try to go to Sydney, although in retrospect it would have been fun to try to make a fourth one. But you sort of have to move on in life and do different things. And I applied to grad school. So I went to grad school after the Olympics, and that actually helped get me in because it's hyper competitive. But I committed what many of my Cal buddies would call the cardinal sin. I went to Stanford for an MBA and a master's in engineering as well.
Okay.
So I did a double again. And it, so grad school, and that taught me a lot. It helped build out the toolkit of understanding and thinking about businesses, but also being at Stanford in the late 90s during the dot-com boom, you couldn't escape from it. You couldn't escape from startup formation. You couldn't escape from venture capitalists being in the news. And it's funny looking back now and thinking like, gosh, the total worldwide population of the internet was 100 million people or less versus the 4 or 5 billion people that are online now. But think about what happened going through that.
Yeah.
We saw very rapid rises and falls of companies, but did get exposed to this whole idea of like, I'd always been interested in entrepreneurship and bringing new things to market, but got exposed to the idea of like, wow, there are these people here that help coach, seed, and grow companies, and then you see things going public. Admittedly, the 90s was a time for a lot of fluffy things going public and then crashing when the bust came. But being in that gold rush cycle that seems to occur every now and again here, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, was really my first real experience with it all.
So you got the bug.
I got the bug, but I did something interesting. So I came out of business school and was like, gosh, should I go join this book-selling startup in Seattle, that Amazon thing, or these search guys at Google? Or I went to a company I went to Adobe Systems. I went to like the big, the tried and the true. And looking back, gosh, my life would have been very different if I'd been a pre-IPO employee at one of those high flyers. But I think I made the right choice in that athletics taught me that you have to do the work. You have to do your base training. You have to put in the work. You have to learn the technique. You have to earn your stripes if you want to compete at that super high level. And it's a process that takes time. It's a process that requires a lot of effort and dedication. And so for me, coming out of business school, getting into product management at Adobe, getting to launch new products for them was a good way to sort of learn from people who'd been there before, done that, and knew the right way to do things. That's not the right path for everyone. And again, it's like, gosh, what would it have been like to have been like first 50 employees at Amazon or Google? I'd probably be done by now. But it would have been a very different path.
Right.
And
right.
I think I learned a lot more by doing it the harder way.
Sure. And then from Adobe?
Adobe, so interesting. So the dot-com bust came, and Adobe did something it had never done in like the tens of years that, more than 10 plus years it had been around, and things were tight. And so I got to take a sabbatical along with 10% of the other people in the company. But what I did with that, my then girlfriend and now wife for several years, and I basically cashed in all our frequent flyer miles and got 2 round-trip tickets around the world and went traveling for 9 months during like the 2002 time. Wow. 2002. And it was a good thing. It was our choice was like, we could do this when they're 65 plus and retired, or we can do this now, or we can still enjoy it and we can go see the world. And that I had always grown up internationally. I grew up in Guam. I got to travel a lot around the Far East and Pacific for competitions and things and see a lot of different cultures. And so, having that break to go and recharge and see different parts of the world and rediscover a lot of things was a really good thing for me. Eventually ended up moving back to the Bay Area. Nothing was happening here. It was, nuclear winter.
Where did you travel, by the way?
This is great. The Star Alliance has these round the world tickets where you can pay, I think at the time, a business class round the world, 28 to, I think it was 30,000 miles, 15 cities was like $6,500 US.
Whoa.
One way.
Wow.
So you can keep going one direction
Keep going.
and just travel on the Star Alliance network in business class.
Wow.
And then rail passes and all that. And so it was a really, I think they still have these deals. I'm not sure if it's still that inexpensive, but if you have the time, and from school and from other things and work, I had friends sprinkled, and competition, I had friends sprinkled all around the globe. So I had, Airbnb didn't exist, but I had plenty of couches to crash on. But no, we spent a lot of time in Europe, Morocco, North Africa, spent a bunch of time in Southeast Asia, all around, in Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji, working our way back to the U.S. It was a good trip. It was a formative trip, and I think an interesting way to start seeing what was happening with the rest of the world in terms of like technology and all. And
did you get anything out of it? I mean, travel's always kind of interesting and fun, but did you gain any kind of new insights through that? And maybe you could expand on the seeing technology and how it's affecting the world.
So part of it was also doing interviews, like in London, in Paris, in New York, in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Australia, in places where I'd worked before. And the dot-com crash really affected a lot of places that were in sort of core tech, and other places were still coming up the learning curve and hadn't really been built out yet. If you think back to when around 2002, that was like 16 years ago, Shanghai was not what it was. Guangzhou was not what it was. I would also say it's also, on a personal note, it's kind of liberating to know that you don't need a lot of stuff, right? You have what you can carry with you in 1 or 2 bags, and that's okay. And again, this is back in 2002. Right now, 1 bag travel is a huge thing right now, for a number of reasons, and it has been for like 7 or 10 years, but wasn't as much before. And I think too, one of the things, so we're a generalist firm, and one of the we see a lot of different things across clean tech, clean energy, information technologies, hardware and software, sustainable products and services, ag tech, space, financial inclusion and literacy, healthcare. And so being able to understand quickly and move through different cultures and spaces is a bonus when you're working in the world that we work in.
Sure. Yeah, it helps to understand the context of different cultures, like you say.
And customers, and also just, healthcare companies, early stage technology companies, big corporations and others, they all, I spent, after we got back, and I spent some time working for a medical device company called Ventana Medical Systems in Tucson, and then went from there 3 years at Samsung. I'm getting to the DBL job, but spent 3 years in Seoul at Samsung headquarters.
Okay.
But the ability to sort of jump in and out of cultures and be sort of is something that all workers will need today in our global economy.
Yeah. It sounds incredibly valuable. So you were at Samsung for 3 years, and at what time did you, through those experiences, did you start the Kauffman Fellowship?
So I didn't. So I'd applied, actually, once we got back from our trip, so early, mid-2002, 2003, I applied. Let me just back up. I got into venture capital through being a Coffin Fellow. Okay. And for people that don't know what that is, the Coffin Fellows program has been around since 1995. It was originally started at the Ewing Marion Coffin Foundation, Kansas City. He owns Ewing Marion Coffin, started Marion Labs, invented like Alka-Seltzer, sold the company for multiple billions of dollars, bought the Kansas City Royals, was a big philanthropist. But one of his things that he wanted to do was to help promote entrepreneurship in the United States, both by supporting entrepreneurs and early stage companies through different programs of education and making things available to them. But also, he looked at the entire system, and one of the areas that was needed some improvement was the capital formation side. How do you find and fund high growth companies which can then create economic opportunity for a lot of people? So he started the Coffin Foundation, started the Coffin Fellows program, which was designed to like bring new people into the industry. You can think of it sort of like a 2-year or so program that's an accelerated executive MBA to help get people up to speed on what it is to be a good venture capitalist, both from the practice of the craft, but also in terms of having the right sort of values. And we may touch on that later, but our industry's been going through a crisis over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Our industry, venture capital, as well as the tech industry, right. for a lack of strong values, or maybe people have lost their way, and it's caused a lot of problems, which don't need going into.
To say
right,
the least.
Right. Yes. So the Coffin Fellows program, it's pretty competitive. It's basically once you're in it. Once upon a time, it was a way for people who weren't in the industry to get into the industry. There's sort of two paths. You were working at a firm, you got nominated, and you went through this like executive MBA VC crash course for 2 years. The other way was come in through what's called the finalist program, which is 1,000 or something people apply each year for a certain limited number of spots, 15 or 20 or 25, and then the fellows would help match you with firms. So it's sort of a VC training program for the VC industry run by the venture capital industry now.
Right.
And so I applied back in 2003, got to the semifinals, didn't get in, went and got some more job experience, applied in 2008, again when I was at Samsung, and got selected as a finalist. So it's kind of the equivalent of getting a Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket.
Right.
Right. It's a great seal of approval. It's sort of a checkbox that you've sort of been vetted as somebody who could do well in this industry, but it doesn't guarantee you the job. You still have to go out and match and find a firm to hire you, and then go through the 2 years of the program.
Right.
So, moved back to the U.S., finished up my contract with Samsung, didn't renew it, moved back to the U.S. in late 2009, spent like 14 months consulting and also trying to match and get hired in by a firm. There's not a lot of seats in VC. So current firms usually hire A, when they're raising and closing a new fund, have more money to deploy, or B, backfilling a position, or C, potentially building out a new practice area. And so the seats that pop up don't happen very often, and you sort of have to be there. I liken it to being, it's like a game of pickup basketball, right, around the playground. And guys are playing hoops, and you could be LeBron James or Michael Jordan. But if you're Michael Jordan in Chicago or LeBron James in Ohio, and the game is being played in LA, if you're not around there when a spot comes open, you could still be Michael Jordan, LeBron James. You're not going to be invited to play the game.
Right.
So I had to come back here to the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, which is the epicenter of things, and hustle a lot. Unlike the Olympics, silver medal doesn't really count for much.
Right.
In second place and not getting offers. So I went through like 4 or 5 rounds of interviewing with different firms and helping startups on the side to earn some money, till I got matched up through at an event to one of the partners here, and that's how I got hired into DBL. And then it took like another year of working here and proving my worth to convince them to help fund me through the program.
Gotcha.
Through Kauffman. But so it's great. KaufmanFellows.org, I believe, is the website.
Okay.
It changes a little bit of time over time, but it's Coffin Fellows. And it's been fantastic because it's they're on. I was in class 17. They're in the 22nd class of people now, and it's grown into a global network of over 500 active practicing VCs, some of whom have left to go back into entrepreneurship, others who are in government. It just provides a really amazing network for both sort of deal sourcing and deal flow, as well as, frankly, a really good support group, as well as, this is a business that you can read a lot about it, but it's also something you have to do to become good. It's like you can read about and watch YouTube videos of how it is to be a good swimmer, but you still have to get in the water and do it and get good coaching and training to be able to move yourself forward. And so Kauffman's been that for me. Yeah,
and I would say there's also, there's so few people who are in it that, and it can be pretty lonely. So having that community, I can imagine, would be helpful. And also just anecdotally, the Coffin Fellows I've met just have been just consistently outstanding individuals, both from that personality point of view as well as the integrity. And then just going back to the VC recruiting piece, the analogy that one of my favorite professors at HBS used to use is you have to like the analogy is you have to be like kind of just hanging around outside the door of the building.
Yeah.
And you never know when the door is going to open, but whoever is outside that door, if they have the right credentials, like is the person they're going to grab. So you kind of want to be on people's minds and part of it is just luck.
Yeah. And you spend a lot of time being in the flow of what's happening in the space you're interested in.
Right.
It's a quirky. It's even today. It's still a quirky thing, and the sort of training and growth of younger venture capitalists to be useful investing partners is. It's still very much an apprenticeship thing. I mean, I'm sure you find that at Obvious, and you did it also when you were up in your Vancouver firm. It takes a while, and the cycle time's a lot longer, right?
Right.
As the other interesting thing that when you switch over to this side of the table is as a product manager or like lead engineer or something, if something was broken on the manufacturing floor, I could go down and help troubleshoot it and fix it, right?
Right.
Or if there's a problem with a customer or something, I can get on the phone, I can go visit. Here, we've written the check to the company, we've funded the management team, we're trying to provide our best advice and input, as well as introductions and things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have no connection. The steering wheel you turn has no connection to anything, right?
Yeah.
You're a consigliere, it's a service business, you're helping the entrepreneurs grow their companies the best way you can so that your investment does well. But there's no direct control anymore. And that's, coming from being a direct operator, that's been one of the toughest transitions to make. I can pull the lever, but there's nothing connected to it.
Yeah.
The control surface there.
I would agree. I mean, we have similar backgrounds in terms of me being more of an engineer and operator earlier in my career, and I would say, that is one of the hard things, and getting back to that analogy, the coach versus athlete. One of my previous podcast guests, Gaurav Jain, he used the same analogy, and he said sometimes, like as the coach, you want to like kind of step into the game and shoot, like if it's basketball, like shoot the ball, but it's really that's not your role, right? And so it's adapting to that role and doing as well as you can as a coach.
Yeah, hopefully it's helped make me a better parent, because there's a lot of times as a parent you're like, want to step in? It's like, no, let them make the mistake on their own.
Yeah,
just be there and just to catch them.
So maybe tell us a little bit more about DBL.
So that'd be great.
Your thesis.
So DBL stands for Double Bottom Line Partners, and so we are a venture capitalist firm that's also an impact investing firm. And it was started back in 2004 before the term impact investing even came about. But our philosophy is this: we are venture capitalists operating under a venture capital model who invest in super high growth companies that have potential to become large and financially successful. But we're also looking for companies, that's our first bottom line. We're also looking for companies to work with that have a second bottom line of creating positive social, economic, or environmental, or all the above change in the areas in which they operate. And to be able to do that in a non-concessionary way, where it's not like corporate social responsibility or doing good, where it doesn't affect the core business, but do it in a way that accelerates the growth of the business. So here's an example of what it's not. I used to work at a large software company in the South Bay. I think I mentioned them already. And we could do Habitat for Humanity volunteering. But did that help our company become a better software company? Not exactly. But it was a good thing to do in terms of like helping the world. Whereas a company like Revolution Foods, which was a Fund 1 company, has created a $135+ million top line business over the last 8 to 10 years, serving healthy meals, kid-inspired, chef-created healthy meals to kids in schools. And they've grown to, they serve over 2.5 million meals a week in eight large metro areas, actually more metro areas, but they have 8 large distribution centers and kitchens around the country. 75-80% of those kids are still on the federal free and reduced student lunch program, which means they hit the U.S. government definition of like poverty level or close to it, so they need this federal government's buying their lunch. So they built this huge, their thesis is like, we're going to create healthy meals for kids to help them address diabetes and other health issues, and also help them study, and also help those who are the most at risk because they're just in a disadvantaged economic class. But we can do it in a profitable way to grow a large business. And so DBL is all about finding businesses that have the potential to do good in the world and create huge impact. And the way you do that is create large, self-sustaining, multi-billion-dollar businesses like a Solar City. Solar City, when it got bought by Tesla, multi-billion-dollar revenues, 15,000 plus employees. All those people have most of those employees, 12,000 or so, are basically roofing contractors, right? It's a job that doesn't require a computer science degree. It provides salary, full benefits, stock option ownership, paths for progression into management and other things. And that engine drove a lot of economic good, in addition to helping create more distributed solar energy on our grid. So doing good in the world, but also has the opportunity by doing that to have a large, financially successful business and therefore provide great venture returns. And so that's our double bottom line philosophy. Companies can have an inherent mission focus, but they don't necessarily have to. We work with we have a broad definition of impact, and our job is to find the best investments and then help them figure out ways that for that company at the life cycle stage that they're in, find ways to improve the business and create that social good while improving their first bottom line.
Makes sense.
I'll give you one more quick example because this is
ahead.
really neat. So, because people don't often think of can you do this? And so it's about supporting women in entrepreneurship. A lot of it is job creation in low-income areas where we can help steer manufacturing facilities or other facilities to create nucleation centers for economic growth, like we did with Pandora in Oakland. But crazy things like the city and county of San Francisco has a 1.5% payroll tax that all corporations have to pay on their employee payroll. So, but if you are a clean tech company in the city and county of San Francisco, under 15 employees, and you get something called a California Green Business Certification, you don't have to pay that 1.5% payroll tax. So, we have two firms here in the city where we've helped them get the Green Business Certification. Aside from being a great marketing thing here in California where people want to do business with socially minded businesses, you go through a power and water audit, you do low flush toilets, you put in LED lighting and other things to reduce your OPEX. So that's a little bit of a benefit. But that 1.5% payroll tax reduction turned out to be over $120-something thousand for one company for last year.
Wow.
So by doing good, and as a startup, you're always cash constrained. That's basically one full-time equivalent employee that they got for doing the right thing. And the rules were kind of buried in the city code, but we found out about it by having a good relationship with the people, both at the head office, but also the people way in the back with a windowless cubicle who've been doing the same job and actually get the work done. And figuring out that, gosh, there are benefits that can be applied to companies of all kinds to help them grow and achieve that first and second bottom line. So it's a really neat example. You never think about it.
I've never heard of that, but that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, I'm a big fan of that philosophy, as we are at my firm.
Yeah.
And but I'm constantly surprised at how many people don't get it right away. Or I would say there's a common misconception that if you're doing something impact related or something with this, that's solving a one of the world's biggest problems, that you're kind of bordering on philanthropy. And so I don't know. We fight that stereotype and try to fight it pretty well.
We do too, and it's been something that's evolved over the years. I mean, in 2004, when DBL first started as the Bay Area Equity Fund, they were like, "You can't make money doing that. You're never going to fund a profitable business." But it takes time and successes to prove people wrong, as well as impact is a broad umbrella. For a long time, it was just foundation grants and philanthropy, and that's what people thought of.
Right.
And this idea of being able to get market rate plus returns by investing in high growth entities is only something that's sort of been evolving over time. And we need more exits to help prove the thesis, but there have been a few good ones, but more exits with different companies in different spaces, and it'll happen. And I think what's really interesting for both social and obvious and ventures and DBL is that consumers, particularly Gen Xers and particularly the millennial generation, people behind them, are really bought into the idea of not just a regular economy, but a purpose-driven economy, where consumers want their companies to be doing the right thing. They want them to be, where possible, more local, more organic, more sustainable, and other things. And that consumer demand is driving the success of a new wave of companies in the area, as well as upstream from them. The baby boomers are aging on and passing on, and there's this wealth transfer that's happening intergenerationally from, say, grandparents and parents who the family business made a lot of money in coal, oil, and natural gas, and the grandkids are on college campuses leading the push for, hey, university, divest your foundation holdings and your from coal, oil, and natural gas. And people are looking, well, we want our family legacy to continue. We want these people to be involved in it. So we're going to shift our family holdings out of coal, oil, and natural gas and into more impact-oriented, sustainable things. And so the LP base for impact investing is just continuing to grow and grow. And then you have additional signals like big corporations like TPG and BlackRock and others making pledges to start offering more impact-oriented options for people who are their clients. You have, on the clean energy side, the CE 100 of a lot of big corporations, the Apples, the Walmarts, and others in the world saying we're going to move to 100% renewable energy. So there's a rising tide of people wanting to do better and have their dollars align with their values, and to try and do it in a way where you can still get the return, but you're not giving up on it by having your dollars align with your values. And that's a good sign for both Obvious and DBL.
It's also where people want to work.
Yeah.
Right? So by having these mission-oriented businesses, it's not only the right thing to do, it's practical, because that's where younger generations want to work. And if you want to get the best people, you have to align with their values. But I think those are some great points. We're probably on the front end of a really powerful movement.
The big wave. It's Maverick's big wave surfing day, and it's time to go and catch some of those.
Nice. So what are a few areas these days that you're most interested in terms of like looking at new investments, whether it's an industry or a technology platform?
So there's a lot going on. We by nature are a generalist firm. We're not, only enterprise SaaS or only this or the or hardware, software. It's funny because in the last few days we've had like 10 different companies come through, but we're looking at a lot at financial inclusivity for underserved populations. We're looking a lot at, continue to look a lot at what's going to happen with the next generation energy grid and the use of energy. Let me back up. So if I were to boil down, like, where do we want to think about as a firm for interesting investment ideas? It starts with today, 7 billion people, 20, 30, 40, 50, 10 billion people. And so not only are we adding 3 more billion people, we're also moving up, hopefully, another 3 or 4 billion people from poverty level to whatever purchasing power parity adjusted middle class means where they live. And the big needs that they have are for energy. So our grid is going under transformation, but we're also investing in firms that provide energy access to bottom of the pyramid customers like our company Off-Grid Electric in East Africa. They need access to water, though that's been a really hard and tough area to make venture level investments in, but I think we've found one that we can do, which is around, it's a company that helps do leak detection and also manage water waste at residential units and households using very intelligent algorithms. We're looking at things that relate to increasing the sustainability and availability of the food and ag sector, because we need to feed everybody. And also things that relate to data access, because just like power and water, data and internet and knowledge access is a utility these days. You need it. It's a must-have to get anything done. So, which is a lot of fun for us because we get to look at so many different things. But energy and Grid 2.0, we have a lot of investments that we're looking at new technologies for Earth observation and monitoring, building off of our work with Planet Labs. Pieces of like key hardware and software infrastructure for the next generation grid, but also pure social things. So we have remote work, future of work, and then things to help reduce food waste. So
awesome.
We have so many different companies coming through. It's kind of a veritable smorgasbord of technologies and businesses, and that's one of the wonderful things about this job and how lucky we are to be able to see sort of really amazingly smart and talented teams coming through and trying to do amazing things, and some of which are fundable, some of which are not fundable, some of which are a stage fit, some of which aren't a stage fit, but it's a constant learning.
Yeah, so you and I have talked a lot about what we love about this job, right? But maybe you could just talk briefly about what's hard about it, like just for people who see it as this like extremely sexy lifestyle.
It's not like HBO.
Yeah. what makes it? What's hard about it, or what's challenging?
So I'll put it this way. So the measure of people very often is not how things are when things are going well or companies are going. It's what people do and what firms and corporations do when things go sideways. And they always do in a startup. Things that go sideways and down, you'll have near-death experiences before, and hopefully you'll pull out of them and go on to a future success, but sometimes you don't. And so it's hard to, as a former elite athlete, it's hard to accept the loss of a company or accept the loss. Just like you hate losing a race, right? You always want to win every race. You can't win every race, but you hate losing.
Right.
There are times when, this is a business where if half of our portfolio companies or close to half aren't a zero, we're probably not taking enough of the big risk to get the big win. And it's really hard to go in and try to help a company work through things and not have it turn out. It's hard going through turnarounds, whether it's having to replace a CEO or reposition a company. There's a lot of tough slogging and day-to-day work that happens that's really boring. It's not all, gosh, the Founder Group had this video a few years ago. I'm a VC, and which people should check out on YouTube. It pokes fun at the industry as well. Yeah. But we like them a lot. We're co-investors with them in a couple of companies. But it's not as, there's a lot of hard work over a long time. So we have companies that we've invested in that when I first joined in 2011, it's 2018. They're still a couple years away from an exit. It's 7 years. We thought our investment memo, they'll go IPO in 2015 or so, 4 or 5 years. No, it's a long and crazy, random, drunken walk of a journey to get to success. And it's a lot of, you do what you can and you try to create those. There are a few opportunities in a year where you can do something, whether it's a key hire or a board member or a round of financing to support a company through a rough patch or helping them out, that can really change the trajectory of a firm and an organization to get to success. And there's a lot of times you do that and it just doesn't work out. And that's a tough part of the job. Also, frankly, if you think about incoming, so we'll see about 2,500 or so. I checked the numbers recently in our database. We see 2,500 something opportunities come through the door every year. Some of them are not warm introductions. It's just, hey, we saw you speak at a conference. Here's our business plan. We're doing this. But of those 2,500, we will probably really dig into maybe 100. We'll go deep on 15 or 20, and we'll make 3 or 4 investments. There's a lot of separating the wheat from the chaff, and sometimes we won't win on the ones that we do put term sheets in on too. So it's a very amorphous job, and people have to be accepting of the fact that there's no set schedule. It's not like, okay, I'm at Adobe, the next release of my product is in 6 months and our development cycle is going to be this, and we're all working toward that one goal, and it's a very concrete set of steps that you need to get there through the software development process, even if it's an agile process these days or not. This is not like that at all. Things take a lot of time, but I think the biggest thing that helps in this kind of work is to have a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding of people and psychology, and because to compete at this level, the table stakes are already great technology, great team, super smart people, hardworking and all that. But helping manage some of the interactions between founders and other board members and other people who may or may not be aligned at any given time is very much an exercise in human relations, and that's probably the biggest skill that one can learn to be successful. Because the other stuff is table stakes, right?
That's a phenomenal point. I'm always surprised by how much human-to-human interactions play a role in the success or failure of companies. Yeah. And I 100% agree with you.
If your listeners haven't seen it yet, there's a great book by Noam Wasserman, who's a professor at Harvard, called The Innovators Dilemma. Right?
Yep.
And the study was done a few years ago, but basically the gist of it is he studied 12 or 1,500 IT tech startups. And he's like, what was the cause of premature death there? Was it wrong market timing, technology fit? What was it? Big competitor came in and crushed them. For most of them, the majority of the failures that happened there, it was because of dysfunctions among the founding and early teams.
Yeah.
It wasn't the technology. They had better technology, they had better marketing, they had better sales, but the teams couldn't work together and grow together with the company, and so it blew up.
Precisely.
And when we're investing, the companies that we invest in are early stage. There's the hope and the promise of the new market and the technology application. And then a lot of it is based on, are these the people that are going to be there and make this happen? And then the bigger question is, are they going to be there and make it happen over the long term? So it's very rare to get a Bill Gates who grows up with this company, a Lyndon Reeve who grows up with this company, and Elon Musk who grows up with multiple companies. I mean, that's unicorns. At some point, you may have to have the difficult conversation of, like, the company's grown to a certain stage and it needs new things.
Right.
You may have to step aside or bring in new, and it's always tough to do that.
Yeah, totally agree. I would second the recommendation of that book. Noam is a treasure. So I think we're going to transition to the rapid fire section.
Lightning
of
round
the podcast.
I will try to be pithy.
Okay, no, you're good. So let's see. What has been your favorite mistake from your past? So something negative that happened, or a troubling time that, if you fast forward to today, is actually something you're grateful for because it benefited you in some way.
That's a good question. There's a lot of small mistakes. I hadn't really thought about that. There are a lot of small mistakes that you try to learn. The base mistakes are ones you can learn from, but I think I'll pick one. And it was interesting too, because I learned that it's when you're an athlete in a sport like swimming, which is mainly an individual sport, except for relays, it's mostly about you. Right? It's you, and you're at the end of the day, you're really only racing yourself and the clock. And if you happen to do a best time, you can take that, and it's a small win. If you happen to do a best time and you're ahead of everybody else, then you can really celebrate because you won. But they'll take the personal best. But I think in this case, it was at the company I worked at right before Samsung, and I was doing well there and moving up, and basically I ended up leaving. And the reason I ended up leaving was that I was in a program that started by the CEO, like a rotational leadership development program, and he was getting ready to transition on, and there were two guys who were going to be the next CEO. One of them was one for the commercial side, one of them was like product and operations manufacturing side. And the person from the commercial side ended up getting chosen to be sort of the next heir apparent. And it was just an interesting lesson in workplace dynamics, because all of us that were associated with the other guy's team, the guy that didn't get chosen to be CEO, we all ended up leaving within 6 months, because very quickly we were doing our jobs, we were doing well, but then it became very obvious and clear that we weren't welcome for whatever reason. We're still needed to do our functions, but we weren't welcome. And I started trying to fight that, and because this is just not make sense, it's not fair, and I'm still performing, but yet nothing's happening. I'm actually feel like I'm being pushed aside, and I was. But the fighting it made it worse, and I had to take a step back, and what I learned was, eventually it all worked out. I ended up getting a job at Samsung, moving to Korea, and I had 3 amazing years working there with that firm. It was funny though, the moment I moved over there, and one of the reasons I went over was because the center of gravity of mobile technology in 2006 and 2007 was in East Asia. Then the iPhone came out, 3 months after we moved to Korea, and everything, and then Android came out and the App Store. It all shifted back here over the next couple of years, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to come back. But just that learning, it's not personal, it's not about you, it's about the company, and that's more important, and you just have to learn to deal with it.
Got it.
And that's helped me be less attached to things and a little bit more detached in a way that I think is helpful when you're seeing what's going on. And where do we run into that? When you have to replace a CEO or move somebody that's a founder along,
right?
And other things like that,
right? That detachment comes in handy.
Yeah, and as a fiduciary, right? If you're
right.
serving on a board, you have to think about all the shareholders. There's a sort of dual hat. It's like I'm thinking about the fund and our return, but I'm also thinking about everybody and what's good for the company overall and what will move it forward.
Yeah, right. Legally, that is our responsibility. Absolutely. What is a favorite quote you think about a lot or that you live by?
Again, on the topic or theme of trying to stay even-keeled and objective about things. And I don't know if it's originally his, but Phil Wickham, who's the past CEO and president of the Kauffman Fellows program. He was in actually Kauffman Class 1 and ran it for about 10 years, and he's the one who was the head of the Kauffman Fellows program when I got in. He sat me down once and he told me, Patrick, there's no such thing as good news or bad news. There's just news. And what you choose to do about it and how you choose to react to it makes it the good or the bad news. Which is a way of saying, like, all kinds of crazy things are going to happen in your life. In fact, I'll give another plug for Brad Feld. There's a blog post he wrote several years ago. It's like, everything in my universe is effed up. Something new in my universe is effed up every day.
Right.
And you can't be overreactive to that. You have to stay like somewhat detached and objective in order to figure out the right path forward. In any kinds of situations, particularly in crises that you're dealing with your company. So, there's no good news or bad news. There's just news and how you choose to deal with it.
I love it. I haven't heard that before. That's helpful.
And I'll give you one more, which is also related. A good friend of mine at Ulu Ventures. I'm blanking on his name right now. But he's the head of Ulu Ventures, and you ask him how he's doing. I feel great today by choice. Which again is another way of saying that, like, there's no good, bad news. It's how you choose to deal with the things that come to you that allows you to operate and perform at a high level. And frankly, if I think back, that's how you had to be as an athlete. Like, you got on the blocks, you went through prelims, your finals, whatever time, you got on the blocks, you did your race, you gave it your best shot, you looked at the result. Sometimes it was awesome, sometimes it sucked. Get up, it's particularly in college dual meets. It's like, okay, your next race is in 15 minutes. You've got to put that aside, get up again, get ready for the next race, and go full out and try to win that one. And what happened, and get up and get ready for the next race.
Yeah, what that makes me think of is when I was running really long distances, one little hack I read about was, no matter how you're feeling, you just tell yourself, like, I feel fantastic. And it was such a silly thing, and at first I was really skeptical of it, but I started doing it, and it really
your body
did help.
listens to your brain.
Yeah, it did work.
We did that, yes, like your set of 10 400 IMs on 5 minutes or something, and it's just like, by number 7, you're just burning and want to throw up in the gutter. It's like, okay, just get through the next one. I feel good.
What's been the most influential book you've read?
That's a good question. I haven't been reading as much as I would have liked in this job. More recently, what's his name? McKeon, Essentialism?
I don't know.
Let me look it up. Give me a second.
Sure.
Yeah, the author's name, this is a good one. And I highly recommend it to everybody who's listening. Greg McKeown, McKeown, Essentialism, Discipline Producer Less. So success for a long time, like when you're in school and when you're younger, it's like, let me do more, let me do a little more, let me do more. Again, back to our jobs, 2,500 something opportunities come through the door to our firm in a year. And you can't do everything and do everything well. You need to focus on the 2 or 3 key things that will make a difference, which is basically the too long didn't read version of this book. And we're all busy in our lives with family and work and for you, this podcast side hustle. So how do you pick and also, you know, in a startup company or early stage firm, there are a lot of fires to be fought, but what is the one that's going to make a difference and change the trajectory and change things the most is what you need to figure out and focus on. So it's, essentialism, Greg McKeown.
I love it. I definitely want to read that.
Disciplined pursuit of less. And the discipline part is the key there.
That's super compelling. How can people find you, follow you, like be in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter, although not that much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on LinkedIn. Our website is dblpartners.vc.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm out and about in the world. And I actually tend to keep somewhat of a lower profile on social media and all. Don't do Facebook for a number of reasons. Twitter I'll do to help promote our companies and all. But you know, I'm the kind of person that has like air gapped my house from smart, resisted the allure of the smart home and other things. Even though I am an engineer by training, I love technology, but I'm also very private. But I can be found. Patrick at dblpartners.vc.
There you go.
That's probably the best way.
There's definitely some benefits to disconnecting and to having some privacy, especially with kids and all that. Yeah. So I totally get it. But that's great, Patrick. I just want to say thank you so much. This has been an outstanding and really fun conversation for me, and I'm sure for other people. So thanks. It
has for me too, Joe. It's been a great pleasure. And before we go, and I know the people on the podcast can't really see this, but I have here a torch from the Sydney 2000 Olympic torch relay, where I got
beautiful.
It came through the Pacific Islands before I went to Sydney, and I got to be a torchbearer for about 5 minutes with the Olympic flame. Wow. I wanted to show this to you.
Wow. I'm holding it. It is beautiful.
It looks like a boomerang.
Yeah.
It has a little gas cartridge in there that held about 10 minutes worth of flame. And so, my relay leg, if you will, was actually on an outrigger canoe in one of the lagoons in Guam.
Get out of town.
It got lit on shore. Someone rowed it out to my boat, and then we lit it in the middle of the lagoon. And then they rowed it back to shore, which was a great thing because I was sick as a dog that day. I don't think I could have run the 500 meters. I had four big burly guys to paddle my outrigger canoe, but something. So I wish your viewers could see this.
We'll get a picture of it after. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, Patrick, thanks again. This has been amazing, and thanks for everybody for listening.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Epic Human Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you happen to be using. And if you want to keep up to date on the latest Epic Human Podcasts, please follow us on Twitter or Facebook at Epic Human Pod. And if you have any ideas for guests or feedback on the show, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.